I am going to explore a scenario where someone asked me, hey, is 200 Atom, which is Cosmos' native token, good enough? Even though nothing I say is financial advice, and even though this is just a hypothetical make-believe scenario, I do want to discuss this nonetheless because to me, that doesn't seem that disappointing. Because, for instance, let's say Atom went to the price of $50, and if that were to happen, 200 Atom at that point would hypothetically be worth 10 grand. Now, some people may be thinking, okay, 10 grand really cares about that. Well, the way I view the situation is this. Even if, let's say, I saved 50% of that, so 5 grand, right? And let's say I use that for the next cycle. And for whatever reason, let's say the next cycle, that 5 grand does a 10x, so it becomes 50 grand. Now, some people may be thinking as well, okay, 50 grand, take a look at this or that. Totally understand that. However, even though in the grand scheme of things, there's a lot of people that I know out there that have like more than that coming in per year. At the same time, a lot of people that I know that have that, they don't have that much in their savings. Now, I think a reason why, or should I say the reasons why I probably think so, is because consistent traveling, which can be expensive, not to mention consistently eating out, which given, the frequency can also be very expensive, not to mention having very expensive car payments, which I think probably are for no reason because I think in some cases they don't need a car that expensive. Also, again, buying random depreciating assets and whatnot. Well, so that combination really in the grand scheme of things, even though some people out there are having like 100 grand per year or something like that, 200, 150, whatever. But because the expenses are so high, sometimes having that in the savings account, like let's say 50 grand, or even in the portfolio, let alone, seems like a kind of difficult amount to achieve. So I get it when people like to say, well, 50 grand, oh, it's not that good. Well, to me, given the current climate where I see a lot of people out there kind of, spend a lot, it seems like a pretty difficult amount to really kind of save up in some cases. So again, I don't think it's too bad. Now, some people may be thinking, okay, who still cares about that? Well, $50 is actually around a 10x from here, which some people may be thinking, okay, who cares? However, let's consider what Ethereum or Bitcoin could maybe hypothetically do in the next 6 months, let's say, give or take. Now, Bitcoin going to 300 grand, that's less than a 3x from here. Ethereum 10 grand, that's also less than a 3x from here. So in both cases, Ethereum, Bitcoin, in the next 6 months, I just wouldn't really want to be so excited over that, especially if I'm getting into it right now. This is just my mentality. So even let's say Atom goes to the price of $25, so give or take around a 5x, right? Even at that point, I would rather believe in that over Bitcoin and Ethereum, but this is just my kind of mindset. I'm not telling anyone to do anything. Again, this is just my perspective when it comes to this. Now, at the price of $50, considering current circulating supply, market cap at that point would be around $23 billion, which some people may be thinking, that seems like a lot, even though they may think that a 10x is not that much. So to respond to that, let me just use this as an example. We've seen Dogecoin pretty much exceed this market cap by around $60 billion, and that was back in 2021. So that was years ago. I don't find this too somewhat of a ridiculous amount. Now, if the market cap needed to be like 200 billion or something like that, whoa, that's just totally out of the question, at least for this cycle, in my opinion. But again, this market cap around 23 billion, it doesn't seem like too outlandish in my perspective. However, we have to take a look at the fundamentals of Cosmos, which I think could also maybe play a large factor. Because we take a look at, for instance, Cosmos. The Cosmos blockchain uses a proof-of-stake consensus algorithm called Tendermint. And by the way, Tendermint makes it possible for Cosmos to process up to 10,000 transactions per second. That's a lot. Not to mention, Tendermint created a toolkit called the Cosmos SDK. Now, in case someone may be wondering, okay, what is that? SDK stands for Software Development Kit. But even besides that point, if we take a look at what that does allow is something called application-specific blockchains to be built. And there's currently, by the way, over 50 Cosmos-based blockchains. Let me explain them real quick. For instance, we take a look at BNB Chain. BNB Chain is very famous. Everyone pretty much knows Binance BNB, so that's pretty massive. We take a look at also Crypto.com's Chronos. That's also very popular. We take a look at Kava, which is also pretty popular. And look, I can just go on and list, over 50, but that'll just, be a little bit useless, right? A little bit boring. So I'm just going to list a couple of the ones that are popular. But I think you get the point here. It's actually, I think, not that bad in the grand scheme of things, having over 50 Cosmos-based blockchains so far. Not to mention, we take a look at how kind of the glue, so to speak, that connects all of these Cosmos-based blockchains together is something called IBC. IBC stands for Inter-Blockchain Communication Protocol. And basically, just to not overcomplicate it, any blockchain out there that has IBC enabled can easily transfer assets to and from any other blockchain that does have IBC enabled. So yeah, in kind of simple terms, that is the way to take a look at it. Now, Cosmos, I don't think it's such a bad project. The use case is not bad. It actually has a purpose, and it doesn't seem like a project that's going to disappear once the fans or hype kind of leaves. However, I also want to mention how typically, as a worst case scenario, altcoins, they usually peak around 18 months after a Bitcoin halving event. Now, this is based off history, right? Historically speaking, I should say. We have to take a look at when was the last time Bitcoin halving event happened? April of last year, 2024. So we do some basic math. We add 18 months on top of that. That's around October this year. I mean, we're kind of close to that. Now, who knows if that date's ever going to come true? Maybe it happens a little bit later because each cycle might be a little bit different. But at the same time, if let's say you have to wait till near the end of this year or Q1 of next year, doesn't seem like too bad of a time frame, at least to me. But the only thing that ultimately is within my control is staying patient, and that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to be dollar cost averaging, holding, and just waiting. I'm not going to be pulling up some random price chart, drawing some random triangles, drawing a falling wedge pattern, because quite frankly, I don't think that does anything. Like, for instance, is the market going to suddenly pay attention to what I have to draw? No. Is it going to make this do this or do that? No, I don't think so. What's the point? I see some people out there draw a random triangle. They say, oh, it's going to happen at this time. Doesn't. They keep adjusting it. Then what's the point? Then there's just adjusting a triangle. That's not my vibe. It's not my style. However, in the grand scheme of things, I'm still very bullish on Cosmos, and I'm still a fan of the project. And feel free to subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I'd greatly appreciate it. It's Willie the Captain, and I'll catch y'all on the next one. I'm out. Peace. Bye.